Welcome back to Clarkston Lighthouse Guidance. My name's Chandler Fleming. I'm the owner and chief therapist at Clarkston Lighthouse Counseling.
And I am Victoria Fleming, owner and therapist at Clarkston Lighthouse Counseling. Welcome to the show where we are going to talk about a difficult subject, bullying.
Yeah, bullying is one of those really, really tough things. We hear a lot about it. A lot of my clients come in and talk about being bullied or wondering if they are being bullied. A lot of times parents will come in and say, hey, what's going on at school? I think my son is being bullied. I think my daughter's being bullied. And it can be a pretty difficult topic.
It's one that's being discussed a lot in the school.
Yeah. So one of the things I encourage people when we approach this topic of bullying is really look at what do you believe.
What is bullying? Is it avoidable? How bad is it really? And can I or my child deal with it? And is violence ever necessary? Are some of the topics we want to cover as you start looking at what you believe about bullying.
Sure. So the first question is, what is bullying? It's hard to define.
It's for sure, yeah.
Sure. So one of the things about bullying and it being hard to define is, some things that kind of add to that definition is somebody using threats or intimidation or actual violence to cause pain to another person. And so there is a intent there, and intent is sometimes difficult to read. I frequently have cases where a parent will pick up their son from school and very thoroughly ask, were you being bullied? Well, I saw that kid hit you. Or that person calls you a bad name, Oh, we call each other that. I had one kid that his best friend called him Poophead. But you know what? It was a term of endearment, actually. I've seen kids that they come up to each other and they punch each other in the arm.
Particularly with boys, that's a common way. Yeah, they'll hip check each other, and and yet a parent could watch that and think, "Gosh, I'm being bullied." Or what is worse, though, is a parent could see a girl say to another girl, "Love your sweater."
Sure.
And the mom thinks, wow, the girl really loves her sweater, but what the daughter knows is she hates my sweater and humiliated me in front of everyone. And so the daughter gets in the car crying and the mom's clueless. So girls can be pretty subtle about their bullying.
I had a girl one time, the group of people that she ate tended to eat at one lunch table. And one of the girls started to hate her, got jealous of her, and got all the other girls to sit at a different table. So when she showed up at the lunch table, they were sitting someplace else. And how do you really nail that down? The girl complained to her guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor kind of looked into it and said, oh, well, they said there was somebody sitting there. So they sat someplace else. Again, it can be really, really subtle. So it is definitely open to interpretation.
Right, and I think that's an important part of looking at how do you deal with it with your kids, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But let's look at, is bullying avoidable? What do you think? Can we avoid bullying?
I hope so, but it's never worked for me. As a kid in high school and throughout my school, I felt like I was bullied. But even in college, and in the workplace, there have definitely been times that I felt like somebody was doing those things. They were violating my rights, that there were threats and intimidation and degrading statements made to me by somebody in the grocery store.
So would you say most people would feel that way, that they feel like they've been bullied?
I think so. It's definitely a matter of scale. Of how bad of bullying is it? How much does it affect me? But I think that most people are bullied.
At some point in time. And then we even talked about, again, that definitional part that's so hard of how a person may feel like they're just trying to navigate a better deal. And we have an example of that. Our son is mowing the neighbor's yard, and a rate had been negotiated, and the rate was $30, and when the man actually came to the house to pay our son, he navigated our son down to $10 less, and our son agreed to it. And so for us, there was a little bit of a sense like, hey, you big bully, how dare you navigate our son down? And yet our son was fine with it. He was like, hey, it's a pretty easy yard, not a problem. But again, it's that definitional part.
Yeah, and I think we have to be optimistic. And part of being optimistic about bullying, which is a difficult, bad thing, is that especially when your kids are younger, is learning those skills to overcome peer pressure and bullying. That, I was a little disappointed that my son was talked down on price, but it was a great opportunity for him to work on those skills of, no, I really think that this is an acceptable price, which can be the same skills he would use to saying, hey, do you want to smoke a joint? Or, hey, do you want to sneak out of school and skip? It's those same skills of overcoming bullying, or those same skills of overcoming peer pressure and being able to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, so
those same
it can
skills
be
of
used
asking
as
for a raise.
a life skill,
Yeah.
for sure. So,
It's an opportunity.
So let's say it is bullying. How bad is it?
Right. So it can be devastating. I mean, a lot of it affects their health. They're nervous, they're worried, they cry, they're
Afraid to go to
hesitant,
school.
afraid to go to school, afraid to go to work. They get caught up in the messages and start questioning who they are.
And I think that anticipatory anxiety is a huge part of it. If a person really has been bullied and it has taken a toll on the person, it can be very hard to get them to go to school, to go to work, and to have to deal with that. So it is important for us to recognize that even though some of it's definitional, there is real bullying out there, and it can be devastating.
Right, and I think it's also important to know, even if it is devastating, how are you going to approach it? How are you going to make this better? How do you overcome it? What is it that you believe about it? And some of that is, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but do we normalize it? Do we say that, you know what, you are different, you are being bullied and most people aren't? Or do we send this message of, you know what, from time to time we're all bullied, and it is something we can overcome. It is something that is a challenge. But let's face that challenge.
And the reality is it helps the child or the adult to shift from, I feel like a victim, or I'm an overcomer. And anyone approaching it as a victim is going to have less success than someone who's like, okay, yes, I've been treated like a victim, but I'm not a victim. I'm someone who can overcome. And I think that's super important. Very often it's when a toddler is learning how to walk and then they fall, how the parent responds, oh no, can elicit a cry. Whereas, hey, that's all right, you just get right on up. Safe, I love that, safe. And so that's very much what we're conveying. It's not that bullying isn't serious, it's not that it can't be devastating, it's just how you respond to the person can be very shaping in how they deal with it.
Right, so be careful not to overreact.
Right.
The next question is, it's very much tied into it. Can I or my child deal with this? And you need to ask yourself, are they dealing with it? And oftentimes parents come to the rescue too soon, and also sometimes too late.
Yeah.
And so you got to have that balance between the two. And then you got to ask yourself, okay, they're not dealing with it. They're refusing to go to school. They're asking, hey, can I stay home? Or they're faking a stomach ache. Then what? And ultimately, I think we have to think long term. And the what is, I want my child and I want myself to be able to handle this.
Yes.
And there are some different approaches. And right now, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, do you report versus...
and when do you report?
When do you report versus tattling? And I have, there's definitely some pros and cons to both sides of that. If it is overwhelming, it's sometimes necessary to report, but we'll talk a little bit more about some of the ins and outs of reporting.
Okay, so do you have an example of when you would report?
I think it's when you have good, credible evidence.
Okay.
So you save it for the big things.
Right.
And you try to make it as black and white as possible.
And I really appreciate what you said, credible evidence, because when you get into the he said, she said, whoa, that gets really difficult. And it's difficult for those that are being reported to, for those in authority to be like, I don't know what to do with this.
Sure.
So what other aspects are we looking at with bullying?
This is really controversial, but is violence ever necessary? So I do have some parents say, I don't want to admit this, but I just told my son just to punch her or punch him.
As hard as he can.
And I'm not going to express my opinion on it, but I do want to tell a story where I had a client who somebody came up to them and said, violence never solves anything. And their reply was, yeah, unless you're a prisoner in a concentration camp. And so I think in the right context, most of us do see violence as a way of solving a situation. There's dangers and risk associated with it, and it's definitely not the first tool, but you need to know what your opinion is and what kind of permission, forgiveness are you going to give a kid who's being bullied if he acts out violently.
And the reality is all extremes are dysfunctional. So to say never violent or always violent, either one of those is wrong. So it's a matter of moderation and appropriate context.
Sure.
So, all right, so is violence ever necessary? That's one that has to be weighed out.
Sure.
Okay.
I just wanted to kind of interject cyberbullying, and there's a lot of parallels to just regular bullying, and there's a lot of discussion today about, is cyberbullying worse? Is there a larger problem with bullying? And just some points to ponder is, one, is that about 15 to 20% of girls are sending nude images of themselves. Yeah, that's kind of shocking and alarming.
And particularly in light of all of the educational information that's out there, whereas over and over and over there are shows being done and programs being done in high school saying don't do it, because images can be found.
Sure.
They can be found. They're never lost really in the World Wide Web.
Right. So they can be posted, they can spread to other people. Also, there's kind of two sides to that. One is that oftentimes the girls that are sending these images feel like they're being bullied into doing it. That there's a level of coercion and threats and so forth. And then once they're out, they feel very, very vulnerable. And they should, because there's a lot of vulnerability to that. So there's kind of two sides of the equation. So that's an aspect of cyberbullying. Another aspect is really it can spread fast. And then the anonymity thing.
Right. It's the fact that someone could post something and it be completely anonymous, because it's entirely possible to open an account under, a false name. And, you and I have talked about cut and paste. You suddenly cut and paste something and put someone's face on someone else's body and send it off. And so that aspect of the cyber bullying is a scary part of it. Like it could be done and very difficult to trace back to done by whom. So we do need to be aware. We need to notice, gosh, is my child seeming preoccupied and seeming distressed when they're on the net, and are they going to a certain page over and over? Kind of what's going on. We need to have our antenna up and be aware of the fact that cyberbullying is going on. And the selfies are great, but inappropriate selfies are very dangerous. So what to do?
So a couple things. One is step one is be strategic.
And this is for bullying in general, not necessarily specific to cyberbullying, but bullying in general.
Yeah, bullying in general, be specific.
Okay.
So this works out really when there's an authority figure around. And I teach people to use what I call the deaf or whisper technique.
I love this.
Which oftentimes a kid's being bullied and somebody will whisper something, you're stupid, you're stupid. And I have that person kind of pretend like they can't hear you. What'd you say? What? What? And the person who's doing the bullying oftentimes gets caught up into it. So they'll say it more than one time louder. And the way our hearing works, the way our brain screens things out, is oftentimes we may hear it subtly the first time, but if something's repeated, we're much, much more likely to hear it. So that means the person in authority, the school teacher, the coach, the bus driver, may think they hear it the first time, but as the person increases their volume, it's much, much more likely. And I've had a lot of success with this, where a kid will come back to me and say, you know what, I went, what'd you say? What'd you say? And then they said it so loud that everybody heard it.
I said, you're stupid.
Right, so it got really loud.
And the teacher heard it, or the principal heard it, or the coach heard it.
So they were in a much better position. It wasn't like they went and told. It wasn't like they made this report. It wasn't like they complained. It became very, very obvious.
And what it does too is it gives the person a sense of power and a sense of control. So, and I love the fact, like you said, is be strategic.
Yeah.
What'd you say? Excuse me, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah.
What? Oh, and like you said, very often the person will be fooled into saying it so loudly that someone hears.
Right.
And the reality is sometimes, even if the person in authority doesn't hear, if some of the other people around, socially, in general, groups are not okay with someone being rude that way very often, you know. So very often the other people will be like, cut it out, you know, you're being a jerk,
Yeah,
you know,
for
and come to
sure.
the person's defense, or hopefully will come to their defense.
Yeah, bullying's not cool. The other thing is, try to teach your child or yourself to ignore the small stuff and report the big stuff. And that's contextual to you, but oftentimes I have kids who complain about everything. He said I drew a funny picture on my paper. I feel bullied. He or she ignored me and didn't talk to me. Those are things that are much, much more difficult to nail down. Report the big things. He called me an effing idiot, or he called me an idiot, or he tripped me. And it wasn't an accident, because that's the third time this week he's tripped me.
He locked me in the locker.
Right.
That's
So
serious.
It's because oftentimes what happens is I find that the people in authority, the school officials or the human resources director, is kind of stuck because they don't know. They don't have the concrete evidence enough, and they
It becomes like the little
tone-deaf.
boy who cried wolf.
Yeah, it
you know,
becomes
so the
cried
wolf
wolf.
really does come, and it is something that's significant or serious, more life-threatening, not life-threatening, but you know,
Right.
dangers involved, and now the voice isn't heard as well because
Right.
there's been so much.
And the last thing in being strategic is don't commit the same crime. So many times I've seen kids who are being bullied and somebody will say mean, hateful things, and then they retaliate. And it's interesting, it's kind of like the saying in sports, the person who, you know, strikes back is the one that gets the flag or gets thrown out of the game. Oftentimes it's the person who says something mean back who ends up getting in trouble, or the officials say, hey, you did the same crime. Be strategic and don't lower yourself to their level, because you really can appeal to authority because you've made yourself just as guilty.
And I appreciate that strategic part. Let's say someone does push you, you know, then you say, hey, what'd you do that for? And you do it with some volume to draw some attention to the situation.
Right.
Because again, attention is not necessarily what the bully wants.
Sure.
You know, so you kind of, hey, what are you doing that for? And you make it bigger, you know, than what the bully meant for it to be, and you step back and not push back.
Yep.
And then very often someone
And
will
it's a way of
intervene.
reporting it without reporting it. Ouch, you're hurting me. Brings attention to that, but it's not like I went and told the teacher that so-and-so was picking on me. Because what that does is it erodes your power, and it erodes, it gives that bully a reward. So you have to be really careful with that.
Yeah, why'd you say that? That's not very nice. And then suddenly people are like, well, what'd he say or what'd she say? And they start listening.
Yep.
And it's strategic. Again, I love that. Be strategic.
Sure.
So
the other thing is practice good offense and defense. And some of the defensive skill is just having positive self-talk. Reassure your kid of who they are, what their value is, that bullying is something that people do, and oftentimes they do it based on their own insecurity.
yeah, and I appreciate normalize it. Most of us, we said if you were to interview the public, probably a very large percentage of people would say at some point in time in their life they encountered some sense of bullying where they felt belittled, physically threatened, that some sort of bullying happened. And so sometimes when we just recognize, hey, I'm not alone, this isn't just about me.
Yep.
This is common to mankind.
I want to combine the next two things, which are fogging and ask questions. Fogging is kind of where you just say, I don't get it. What are you trying to say? What do you mean? You think I'm what? And asking questions sometimes can really throw a bully off. You're a real idiot. Yeah, based on what? Compared to like the average person or an average fifth grader or whatever. And sometimes they'll look at you like you're crazy, but it really sends this message of, hey, you're not getting to me. And it also brings up that subtle awareness of other people around, that authority figure. So if you engage them in a conversation and they continue down that path, it helps. And it's not giving them that reward. Oftentimes we give them that reward when you show that it bothers you, oftentimes it reinforces that behavior.
And again, that's such a strategic thing to do, and it's something that puts the attention back on the bully, and the bully really isn't wanting the attention on them because they recognize they could get in trouble.
What do you mean?
So, see? Yeah. How
really?
are you? Yeah. And this is where that practice comes into play. I mean, on the inside, an individual may be quivering and feel like a nervous wreck, but this is where, like, literally in a mirror, let's say, you know, there's a situation that has been ongoing happening, and you know it's probably going to happen tomorrow. I bet you so-and-so is going to call me this thing again tomorrow, or is going to threaten me at the lunch table or whatever. And so literally in the mirror, practice what you're going to say, practice looking calm, even though on the inside you may be thinking, you know, but just be like, oh, really? And practice having that demeanor of, you are not getting to me at all. Because like you said, it'll throw off that bully.
Sure.
And that's what that's what you're really striving to do.
Oh,
break the pattern.
And then the last thing what to do is normalize. Let them know that they're not alone, that many people do experience bullying throughout their life, that it's not right, but it takes place a whole lot. Minimize. What is the meaning to it? You know what? That person is picking on you maybe because they're jealous. Maybe it's not that you're stupid, that you're smart. And oftentimes bullying statements are totally to the opposite. Where I had a very attractive young lady, another girl bullied her and said, "You are so ugly. Who cut your hair?" She had beautiful hair. It was purely jealousy. So part of that minimizing is saying, you know, it's really not about you, and it can be jealousy. So you give an alternative meaning. The other thing too is listen to when your child says, "It's not a big deal." Oftentimes I have parents really say, yes, it is a big deal. That's wrong. And there's a balance to that. You don't want to teach your kid to be a doormat, but oftentimes when you're saying it is a big deal to your kid, when they're saying it's not, you're either misinterpreting what's going on, or you're making it a bigger deal for them, and they are now being bullied by you in some ways because they're trying to please you and still maintain their safety. So be careful. Listen to your kids when they say it's not a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Give them some room.
Because they may be handling it. They may, part of the way they're coping is, you know what, it's not that big. You know, he picks on everybody. So I'm just going to ignore it.
So they're trying to normalize and minimize, and you're not allowing them to normalize or minimize.
Right. And then, this is kind of the long term. Reassure them they can handle it.
Absolutely.
Because those same anti-bullying skills are the peer pressure skills, the negotiation skills. So you want to reassure them that they have that capability and use this bad situation of your kid being bullying to strengthen them into skills that apply to other areas.
So the next time our son is in a negotiation, he may step up and say, no, we agreed to, and keep it there.
Right. Yeah. Hey, this is the price we agreed on. And then the last one is continue to monitor. You know, you don't want to go too far to the other side, and just because your kid says it's not a big deal, to not get to believe that too much. So I appreciate everybody watching the show, and recognize that bullying is part of life, and use this opportunity to make yourself, to make your children a stronger person.
And to remember, all extremes are dysfunctional. So to act like it's not happening at all is not wisdom. To make a bigger deal than it is not wisdom. So as you said, continue to monitor, be strategic, keep monitoring, be aware, and be available.
If you have more questions on this matter, feel free to write us, text us, call us. Here at Clarkston Lighthouse Counseling and Clarkston Lighthouse Guidance. We have a Facebook page, and we really would love to get questions from the audience. Those are some of our more fun shows to do, is
they
answering
really
those
are.
questions that people from the audience provide. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
The views expressed in this show are for general educational purposes only and do not constitute professional advice on any subject matter, nor do they necessarily reflect the views or opinions of its guests or of Independence Television. If mental health assistance is needed, please seek professional licensed treatment.